Okay, now you might want to get a piece of paper out. If you got graph paper, that's great. If you don't have graph paper, then I want you to get a straight edge out. And that's called your driver's license or your ID card or whatever. And I want you to draw the whole page. I want you to draw a graph like this. In other words, let's say this is your page of notebook paper. I want you to draw, of course, you're not going to have the grids that I have, but if you got graph paper, you will. Well, there it is. And just graphing, graphing. When you see graphing in the syllabus, that should say I should bring graph paper.
But not every day.
No, we don't go over graphing every day. If you read the syllabus, it says we're going into graphing today. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm supposed to tell y'all everything, aren't I? I'm sorry. I don't know why I keep forgetting that I'm supposed to tell y'all everything, like going to the bathroom, when to eat. Okay, it's my fault. It's my fault. Okay, this is what your graph should look like. Just draw a vertical line all the way down and a horizontal line all the way across. Just like that, because you got to write in each quadrant, so you have to have it big enough to where you can write in each quadrant. Now, this is going over a lot of stuff that y'all probably learned in pre-algebra and Algebra 1, and that's fine. But some of you have not had Algebra 1 and pre-algebra in a couple of semesters, so you may have to do a little bit of review. Really? He took the styluses. Both of them?
Oh my God.
He took both of them. There was two in here. There's still one from next door because there's nobody in the next room. The next room does not have a single stylus in it. Got a stylus Nazi. Now we've got a volume Nazi and we got a stylus Nazi. Okay. The one that takes the volume off they take the volume knob off the speakers and they turn all the computers on silent. So whenever you do pull up a video, you have to go through an act of Congress to get sound because of the sound Nazi. That's what the sound Nazi is. Alright, so we've got a y-axis and we've got an x-axis. This is positive infinity going that way. This is negative infinity going this way. Y, positive infinity going this way, and negative infinity going this way. So there's your two axes. They cross at the origin. The origin has the coordinate of 0, 0. Now in GPS, in land surveying, we usually put 10,000, 10,000. Why? Because that way, everything over here, or everything on your grid is positive. If you have 10,000, 10,000, or 5,000, 5,000 right here, then everything is positive, and you don't have to worry about any negatives. Okay? So you do not have to start the origin at 0, 0. That's just in mathematical classes, that's what it always is. But in real life, you can put anything you want to with the origin. In this quadrant, which is the first quadrant, you have positive x and you have positive y. Both of them are positive because you go in the x direction first, and then you go in the y direction. Why do you think that is? Why do you think you read x first, and why do you think x comes first in the coordinates? Which way do we read? And people wonder why we're last on SATs.
Hey.
Not because of you, because of the teachers.
Hey, you can see now. That was a kid.
Okay. All right, which way do we read?
That's right.
Well, then that's all you got to remember.
Or you can remember you walked it over and do it.
Sounds good. I like her better. You start using that one.
Or you gotta walk through the elevator before you can go.
Okay.
Public school.
Left to right. What comes first in the alphabet? So that's the one you remember.
I would have had to sit there and do my ABCs.
Oh, I said A. Put it out there. This is the first thing in the alphabet.
Okay. X goes in this direction. Y goes in that direction. Over here, the second coordinate. The second quadrant.
Actually, that's the fourth if you're a machinist.
Actually, it's the fourth if you're a surveyor also.
Oh, congratulations.
Yep.
I'll take a second.
In the real world, the mathematics does not apply. In the real world, this is the second quadrant. This is the third quadrant. That's the fourth quadrant. I didn't know it was machinist. I didn't know you needed to know that. Negative x and positive what? Y. Third quadrant. Negative and negative. Put a smiley face in there. And then the fourth quadrant is positive and negative. So that means that the x is positive here and the y is positive here. Negative x, positive y, negative x, and positive x, negative y. So anytime I want to plot a point, the x will come first. So if I want to plot a point at 2, 4, we automatically know, since we've been reading since the 3rd and 4th grade, that x comes first. So 2 is x. That's the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be along the lines of what you've been doing for the last 10 years. So 2, I'll do this in, let's make that red. So 2 and 4 would be 1, 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's your point 2 and 4. Negative 3 and positive 2. that is that one. And of course, what does 2 points make up? A line. And that's what we're studying in this chapter, in this section. We're studying linear equations. Okay? So there's your line. Now, pretty much everything that we do is going to be based on the equation for this line. That line is called linear. The word linear means straight what? Line. There's a lot of people that go through algebra, and I'm serious. A lot of people go through algebra and they don't know what linear means. Like a linear equation. A linear equation means an equation that describes a straight line. So you'd be surprised how many people don't know that. The model for a linear equation, there's two models. Actually, there's one. And it is y is equal to mx plus b. Y is equal to mx plus b. So we're going to put that right here. And we're going to talk about y is equal to mx plus b. I'm going to take this highlighter and I'm going to highlight the y. Y is your output. It represents the range. The range is the number of values that is generated in the y, on the y. Some people would say it's the product. What is produced. But most of the time, anything having to do with the y-axis is called the what? The range. So out of all those words, that's probably the one you need to remember most of all, especially if you're going to be taking another math course in the future. All right, let's highlight the x. And the x basically is the opposite of input, which is, opposite of output, which is input. The word that correlates with the input is the domain. Take our mauve color. And highlight the M. M is equal to slope. Vertical over horizontal. Later on, today, later on, is delta y over delta x. Some of you chemistry people, what does delta mean? Anybody know that took chemistry? Change. y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Now, out of all those three, which one should you remember? I would highly suggest that you remember this one. And then we'll do in the light blue. And the blue is equal to the y-intercept. And you can write it, most people write it as 0, comma, whatever b is. That's why you take the sign of it. Now, this is important for you to remember because on the next screen we're going to talk about finding the slope. And one of the ways to find the slope is to observe the slope. And to observe the slope, you either got to have a line on a graph like that, or you've got to have an equation with y by itself. The third way is to calculate the slope, and the way that you calculate the slope is that right there. Okay, so we're going to do all three of those. The first one, we're going to title this page. Let's title it "Finding the Slope." First way. Observing via graph. Basically, you start from the origin. Count x, you count y, and then put x and then y over x, and that's how you find your slope. Now, of course, you know, anything physical is hard to show, kind of like giving a haircut over the phone. It's hard to show it unless you're actually looking at the graph. So take this and follow along as we go to the first graph that we did right here. Or start from a point. This one does not go through the origin, so you can't start from a point, the origin. You have to start from a point. So I'm going to start from this point right here. And I'm going to count my x's. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2 in the y direction. So that would be 2 in the y direction over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And which direction is it going? Well, which way do we read? So you're going to put your little car right here. Because we read from left to right. And what is that car doing? Uphill. How do you say uphill? Positive or negative? So your slope is positive to this. Everything in mathematics is based on you reading left to right. And that's how you find the slope when there's a graph.
Do you ever watch Hitch?
got Will Smith in it, despite of him being a matchmaker?
Yeah,
Or-
well, your side profile is like one of the guys who get a really rich girl.
Thank you. All right. I don't know where that comes from. All right, 2. The second way to observe the slope, observe by the equation. Y equals mx plus b. And now that I've told you what y is equal to mx plus b is, what letter do you look at? The m. So I'm going to use this example. Y is equal to negative 3x plus 2. So you will take your handy dandy highlighter and you will highlight that M and you'll highlight whatever's in that spot. Now I told you slope is vertical over what? That is a whole number. So what's under all whole numbers? 1. So you have to rewrite that. If you're wanting to graph the slope, you have to rewrite it as, you would say, m is equal to negative 3 over 1. Now that is if you need to write it as vertical over horizontal. Most of the time you don't have to do that, but if you are graphing the slope, then you would put 3 over 1. Now it's a negative slope. Let's go look and see what a negative slope looks like. Well, let me erase all this stuff down here. Which way we read? So I'm going to put me a little car right here. And I'm going to take my line maker and I'm going to color it red. And I'm going to put my dot right here. And somebody tell me what a negative slope would be. Like that right there. Because what is the car doing? Simple as that. I actually have had teachers to make that complicated before. There is no reason for that to be complicated. Huh? I'm preaching. No. There's no reason. Okay? Oh, I was ranting this morning when one of my students said that we were having a discussion on real country music versus what they play now. And one of my students said that some guy named Luke Bryan was bigger than George Strait. And everybody in the classroom said that she was retarded. I think it would be like a pimple on his finger, something like that. I think that's the word that one student used, pimple on George Strait's finger. His little finger, yeah.
I got this Christmas album.
George Strait? You just failed the class. Anyway, I have no idea what we're... Oh, I was ranting this morning. The class was ranting too when she said that. That would be like comparing, I don't know, Elvis or Michael Jackson to somebody singing down at the bar down here. I mean,
Karaoke.
yeah, that'd be, yeah. I'm not even going to that. Anyway, so that's how you find M when you have a formula. Now, in order for it to be in the equation form, you have to have y what? by itself. Y has to be by itself. So you have to solve it before you get to this point. How many of these will be on the test? Probably very few to none. Because I want you to calculate the slope. That's what we're going to do next. The third way is to calculate the slope. And I'm putting it in red because that's what I want you to be able to do for the test. 3 or 4 questions at least will be on calculating the slope. Now, to calculate the slope, how do you know to calculate the slope? Well, one, the directions will say calculate the slope. It's not going to say find the slope. If it does, it's really not correct. Because finding is when you, what? You see it. Calculate is when you actually analytically calculate it, or mathematically calculate it. So, how do you know? Well, usually the problem will give, when I say give, there's 3 ways it'll give it to you 2 points. Somehow the problem is going to give you 2 points. Now, what are those 3 ways that it could give you 2 points? Well, one way is it can give you 2 points is a line with 2 points on it. Okay? Meaning a black line across a graph and it has 2 green dots on it. Okay, and you got to figure the coordinates to those dots. All right, that's one way it can give it to you. And it'll say calculate the slope. Now what it says find the slope. When it says find the slope, then you just count the blocks. But if it says calculate the slope, then you have to do it like this. So don't get mad if you don't get it correct because you didn't calculate it correctly. But I don't think you got to worry about it on this test. B. Just a line. Did they give you the 2 points? No. You got to what? You got to find 2 points. This one is the one that I would least give you. I do know of a couple of homework problems that have 2 green points on the flat line. And the one I'll give you on the test the most, C, will be C. And that will be given 2 points. And what do I mean given 2 points? 3, 1, 4, 7. In other words, I just give you an X and a Y, and I give you an X and a Y. This one is the one that you're going to see the most of in any math class. So let's take this guy, 3147, to the next page, and let's calculate. I want to write in black now, so I don't like red. 3, 1, 4, and 7. Which way do we read? How many points do we have up there? 2. Everybody agree with that? All right, so the first one would be called x of 1, y sub 1. What do you think this one's going to be called? X sub 2 and y sub 2.
And what?
Y sub 2. Y subscript. That's what you call it. Now, and I'm glad you asked that because a lot of people don't know how to pronounce those 4 things up there. They'll say XY, X1, Y1, X2, Y2. Well, that's not right. It's X sub 1, Y sub 1, like subway, like submachine gun, like submarine, huh?
Sounds like you're whining, that's why I was like,
Y sub 1, whack, whack, whack. No, that's what's some of the. No. X sub 2, Y sub 2, Sub, SUB. Now what does those things mean? When you see a subscript in science or math, that means the first temperature versus the what? Second temperature. The first Y versus the second Y. The first whatever, you know, is the where it comes in line. Think of it as an assembly line. Think of you ordering 2 brand new white F-150 trucks for your company. And you want nothing but the stripped down salad. Okay? Vinyl seats, vinyl floor, AM, FM radio, air conditioning, and that's it. All right? They don't even have any mats in the floor. All it is that black vinyl. All right? The only difference between those 2 vehicles is what? The VIN number. VIN, the VIN number. So these are VIN numbers. This is your first X, and this is your what? Second X. This is your first Y. This is your second Y. It's just like a VIN number. All right? And the formula for slope is delta Y over delta X. Now this is Impress Your Friend's way of writing. You're not going to do it that way. Okay? When you see delta Y over delta X, it's changing Y with change of X. But the actual formula is Y sub 2 minus Y sub 1 over X sub 2 minus X sub 1. And I tell students the first thing you do is draw 2 sets of what? Parentheses. Now why do I say draw 2 sets of parentheses? Because signs, plug and chug, that's right. And what are the 2 things that are going to hinder you with plugging and chugging? Signs and fractions. Okay? So that's why. If you walk into my class, if you walk into my office right now and say, Hubert, I made up a problem for you, I want you to do it. See if you can get it right. See if you can find the slope of this line. And you made it up and you want to see if I can do it. I would do that right there. And I got 2 degrees, 3 degrees, if you count all 3 of them, and I still use parentheses when I do my slope. Because if you put in a negative, that negative right here will make this what? Make that a positive. And if you don't put the parentheses, you're not going to remember the negative either here or the negative here. It's just going to slip, and then you're going to get mad because you got it wrong over something simple as a negative. So, plug and chug. 7, 1, 4, and 3. Now tell me what's hard about that. Look at it. 7 minus 1 is 6. 4 minus 3 is, so your slope is or 6 over 1, whichever one you want to write. Now, this is what most people would write the slope as. If you are graphing the slope, then you need to do this. And I'm saying that 2 or 3 times because that way you'll know which one to use. This one is to write as an answer. This one is if you're going to graph. Let's do a narrative. Okay? I'd go ahead and quit if I was y'all. Why? Fractions. You can't do fractions. I tell students if they ever get confused Always make sure everything is a what? Fraction. That way maybe it'll trigger that you got to get a what? Common denominator. I'd go ahead and plug everything in first, and then you can get your common denominator. So this is x of 1 plus of 1, x of 2 plus of 2, parentheses minus parentheses, over parentheses minus parentheses, 1 over 2 minus 2 over 1, 8 over 3 minus 3 over 1. Now what we could do to make life a whole lot easier is to get a common denominator all the way through. But you don't have to. You can just get a common denominator for the top and bottom. It's whatever you want to do. I'm going to go ahead and get a common denominator for all of them. Common denominator of 2 and 3 is 6. And all of you know that because of unit 1. What can you not get rid of in mathematics? 2 things you cannot get rid of. Fractions and what? Signs. If you suck at either one of those, that's why you can't do algebra. Because you suck at one of those 2. And if you don't suck at them, then you should be able to do it. How many times will 2 go into 6? 3 times 1 is? How many times will 1 go into 6? 6 times 2 is? What? How many times will 3 go into 6? 2 times 8 is? And how many times will 1 go into 6? 6 times 3 is 18. Now we'll take this guy. And take it over to the next page. I had to evaluate or observe an adjunct part-time instructor this morning, and he would put the assignment on the board right here, and he would work it over there, and he was just working in one spot. He would go right here, in this little area right here, and he worked like 15 problems, and then he'd erase. And the whole board was white, except for this little area right here. It was all different colors and erased, and you couldn't hardly see anything in the middle. And like, no, just use the white color. I mean, getting away from the class. Really did. All right. So what's 3 minus 12? Negative what? 9 over 6 over. And what's 16 minus 18? And what you do when you divide by a fraction? Multiply by the what? Multiply, I'm going to do it in blue just so you know that I'm bringing it upstairs. And multiply by negative 6 over what? And what happens to the 6's? And the negatives cancel, make a positive. So your final answer is what? Positive 9 over what? So your slope of that line is 9 over 2. Now do you see why you put the parentheses? You put the parentheses to keep everything what? Separate. Keep everything separate. Now, you could have used, what was this, 3 up here and 2 down here, or vice versa. You could have done that and you got the same answer. That's fine. But the reason I use 6s is because I knew you would multiply by the reciprocal, and what would the 6s do? Cancel. That's why I did it. Okay? Ready to do a nerd? Oh yeah, we're going to do these until y'all are sick of them. Because besides fractions and besides decimals, fractions, positives and negatives, and word problems, this what we're doing right here is one of the biggest things students can't do. Calculating the slope. So, -2, -1, 4, and 7. I'll let y'all do that one. Oh, guess where the remote control that I took back to the room came out of a science lab. Like chemistry. The stylus is missing. Who was in here before? I think we got a hold on who's stealing everything. Science, general science people. All right. So first of all, we label x of 1, y sub 1, x of 2, y sub 2. Y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Y sub 2 is 7. Y sub 1, negative 1. 4, negative 2. 7 minus a negative 1. 4 minus a negative 2. Oops, sorry. Two will go in there. 4 is first. So there we had a bunch of negatives and we came out to be what? And the only other one is if you have all negatives. Y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Y sub 2 is negative 8. Y sub 1 is negative 3, negative 5, and negative 2. What's negative 8 and negative 3? And negative 5 minus a negative 2. Your answer is 5/3. So the negative divided by negative is a positive. Now, where do people mess up? What's these negatives? Negatives and, of course, your fractions. And see, really, if you do it this way, there's nothing to remember except for y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. You don't have to remember anything else except read what? That's right. So what else is next? Well, there's these words. find an equation. Now I'm giving you pretty much about 60% of the test when I'm showing you how to calculate the slope and how to find an equation. The rest is graphing the lines. Now, there's going to be three types of problems that you're going to see that's going to ask you to find the equation. One is given a line with points. The other one is just given a what? Line. Does that sound familiar? Just like slope. And usually I don't do this one. Usually I give you 2 points. Or the third way is given a point and a slope. If you're given a point and the slope, or if you're given any other of these, you've got to use the point-slope equation. And the reason I highlighted the point and the slope is so you can see that in order to use this equation, you've got to have a what? A point and a slope. Now when you see the equation, you're going to think it's all difficult by the way it looks. It's very intimidating. Kind of like quadratic formula. Y minus y sub 1 is equal to m times x minus x sub 1. That is about the second most important thing for you to memorize besides y is equal to mx plus b, third thing. And how to calculate the slope. Y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Which of these will you see the most of? This one. Given a point and a slope. I'm going to show this one last. Okay? The reason I'm going to show this one last is it's the easiest. Okay? When you're given a point and slope. This one, and this one, of course, you find these. This one is the most difficult because you're not given a what? A slope. You're only given a line, and what you have to do, you have to have a what? A slope, so you have to calculate the slope first, then you have to plug it into the point-slope equation. So since we've been doing these, we'll go ahead and start with one like this, where we're still practicing the slope formula, and then we'll plug it in. So the first example of finding an equation is going to be like the first type. Find an equation given the following points. And that's what it's going to say. And it's going to say 3, 1, 5, 7. It's going to say something like that. You cannot do anything with the point-slope equation unless you've got a point and a slope. We've got to find the slope because all we got is a point. We've got 2 points. We only need 1. So m is equal to y sub 2, 7. Y sub 1, 1. Y sub 2, x sub 2, 5. X sub 1, 3. Yeah, cannot be good. So 7 minus 1 is 6. And 5 minus 3 is, so our slope is 3. Now we have a point have a point and a slope. Now, why, Hubert, did you pick 3 and 1? You could have picked 5 and 7. Why did you pick 3 and 1? That's not rhetorical, I'm asking y'all. Huh? Smaller number. And that follows along the KISS method. And the KISS method is keep it simple. Alright? So, we're going to, you could use 5 and 7 if you just like punishment. Stupid. I don't usually say the last.
Oh, okay, I'd like to do it.
Okay? So, alright, we've got a point, which is 3 and 1. So this is part 2 of the problem. This is part 1. This is part 2. And I'm just going to rewrite my point, 3 and 1. And the slope is 3. So here's part 2 of the problem, and I just write my y minus y sub 1 is equal to m times x minus x sub 1. Now before we start, I'm going to ask you to read this from left to right and tell me what these 2 numbers are.
3.
X of 1 and y sub 1. Y'all could break the handle with a banana.
You said numbers.
I said, tell me what these numbers are. X of 1 and
The 3.
y sub 1.
There's a 1.
So y minus parentheses is equal to parentheses times x minus parentheses. And what goes here?
1.
1. What goes here?
3.
3. And what goes here?
Another 3.
And now just solve for y. Y minus 1 is equal to 3x minus 9. Y is equal to 3x. What's negative 9 plus 1? And that's the equation for the line that goes through these 2 points. And that's how you do, that's how you find an equation given a point and a slope. I'm sorry, given a point, given 2 points. Now, what's the third way to find an equation using a point and a what? Slope. So which is easier? The third way, point and a what? Slope. You just got to plug and chug, you just got to do this. Now, when y'all get back from y'all's break, we'll go over the handout that y'all have been given. Somebody turn off my button for me. Vanna, would you do that?